Hey guys, AshFiMon here. So if you've been keeping up with the series and you know what I'm about to say, if you haven't, a few years ago I did a lot of my paperwork in Jamaica, and since then I get inquiries from relatives and acquaintances that pretty much just asked me about my process and what are some things they needed to know as well. So I figured if they had questions, there are probably other people in the diaspora that has questions too. So I figured I'd collate all of my experience together so that way I can be of resource to you in this mini online series that I'm doing. So this video is actually video number 3, where as you can see from the title, I'm going to talk all about my citizenship story. And if you missed the first 2 videos, I'll link them down below. And they were the TRN video, and I went into the second video was about citizenship, where I explained in detail about what you need, the requirements, and so on. So if you didn't watch that video, that might be a good video to watch before you watch this one. So, okay. Many years ago, one of my aunts told me that I could get Jamaican citizenship. So shout out to Barrias, that's my pet name for her. And so I kind of kept it in the back of my head. I guess at the time I wasn't really, like, I was interested, but I guess at the time it wasn't the right time. Let's just put it that way. I didn't really look further into it. So some years passed by, and then this family trip was coming up where we knew like a year in advance what was happening because it was our family reunion. So I was like, you know what, this is the time to get it done, because prior to that particular trip, I haven't been back to Jamaica in like 5 years. So I guess this was just the right time. So as it got closer to the trip, of course, I did my research to see what I needed. And of course, I and my parents have good record keeping, so we knew where all of our documents were. So as it got closer, I took my parents' documents, and even though you only need to apply under one parent, I brought both of their documents just in case, because if something goes wrong and I'm missing something, I can't just go home and go get it because, the documents are in Florida. So I had everything. I even brought both of their birth certificates, both of the passports that they landed on. I had all the information that I would need just in case. So I'm in Jamaica, and some days go by as I'm there, and I remember calling one of my cousins, Dale, to, kind of just talk about it. And, he just made sure I had everything, and then, kind of just give me some tips and stuff. So he's like, keep in mind, it's Independence time, which we were down there during Independence. So he's like, Jamaica's kind of going to shut down, so to speak. So just be mindful of the days and the times that I'm going. So I also remember asking, is it going to be really crowded? So he's like, well, because I'm doing citizenship, it shouldn't be, because most people down there are probably looking about passport or immigration stuff. So I'm like, okay, cool. So some days go by, and he did tell me to because one thing I was missing was some photos, and I totally forgot. And he did tell me where to go, which is next door to PICA. There's a photography studio, and they can do the photos. So some few days go by, and I was like, you know what, I think today I'm going to go to PICA. So I call my uncle, and he gives me On-Time Taxi's number. So I was like, okay, I'm going to call the taxi and go to PICA that day. So I'm in the house, getting myself together. And my aunt, not the same aunt that told me about citizenship, a different one, she was like, where are you going? Because she sees I'm getting dressed and moving around. So I'm like, I'm going to PICA. And she's like, what's that? So I had to passport, immigration, citizenship agency. So she's like, what are you doing there? So I'm like, I'm getting my citizenship. So why are you getting citizenship? So it was one question after the other. So I was like, because I want to. And then so my other cousin was kind of in the conversation, and, we were talking about it, and he was just like, yeah, Ash should do it, and so on. So she's like, how are you getting there? So I'm like, I'm taking a taxi. And she was like, God forbid I was going to actually take a taxi. She did not want that. So, I didn't have any issue with it, but she was, not having it. So she asked my cousin to take me, and I was cool with that, too. So me and 3 of my cousins, we go to PICA. So they dropped me off, and I told them I'll call them when I'm ready, because, most of us have, Jamaican phone numbers while we're there. So I was like, okay, I'll call you when I'm ready. So they dropped me off, and I go through the security guard. Well, the security gate. So the guard is like, what are you here for? So I'm like, citizenship. So he tells me where to go. So keep in mind, Jamaican directions are not always very clear. It's not okay, at the second red building, make a right, or anything like that. It's like, go up this, go around this, and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, I found the right building where I was supposed to be. And then there was another security guard where I had to buzz in. So she buzzes me in, and I can't really remember I don't think that was the case. if she checked my documents, or I just remember like, oh shoot, I don't have my photos. So I left and went to walk next door where my cousin Dale told me to get the photos done. So I got the photos done, and when I was there, the guy, asked like, what do what pictures do you need? So I said citizenship. So in the previous video, you see that I talk about the laundry list of requirements that what the photo requirements are. So when you go to a professional or someone that actually knows the requirements, you don't have to take it upon your head to try to like figure it all out, because it's a lot. So I take the photos, and like, for example, like you cannot smile like in the photos, for example, or anything like that. I remember I had like faux locks in at the time, and the guy was like trying to push my ears forward because the ears had to show and everything. So, and I knew I needed to take the pictures because I remember having on makeup, but I guess like before I got into PICA the first time, I guess I like totally forgot. So we take the pictures. He prints out 4. So I think I pay like 4 photos for 450 JM. Excellent price when you transfer that into US. So much better than like the quality that you would probably get like at CVS or Walgreens, some Dega quality of pictures for like $15, or when they want to run itself for $12. But Jamaica don't accept those like instant photos, as they call it anyway. So I got the photos, and then I went next door. So he was great, and I'm gonna leave his information up here. Super quick, super professional, everything. So I go back next door, go upstairs, sign my name, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting. It's just a long process. That's what I realized. Doing things in Jamaica, it takes forever to see a clerk. But once you finally see a clerk, it doesn't take as long. And I'm waiting and waiting. Finally, they call my name, and I go to the desk. So I see Miss England. So shout out to Miss England, because she comes up again in the story. So I'm at the desk. Miss England's going through my paperwork. She looks at my photos. She flips it over, and she's like, Miss Moncrief, your photos aren't notarized. So in Jamaica, they call you like Mr. and Mrs. by your last name. So I'm just like, huh? So it was totally on my bad, because I know my cousin Dale probably did tell me, and I know I probably seen this in my research, so I totally, take the blame for that. So it's like, everything else is good, but your photos are not notarized, so get them notarized, and then I can like come back and, apply. So I'm like, okay. So that was totally on me. So when I stepped out in the hallway, I called my uncle, the same one that told me about on-time taxi, because we had worked out that he was going to be the one to like pick up my citizenship for me, and stuff like that, because he was supposed to be coming into town like a few weeks or the following month after I would have been back. So I knew like, okay, I'll just have him pick it up for me. And I had planned to expedite my application, just simply because like I didn't remember exactly what his travel arrangements were, but I didn't want to like mess up his schedule with when my papers was going to be ready. So I called my uncle, and I'm like, they said I need a JP. And I knew a JP was basically a notary, but at the time, I was like, what does JP actually stand for? So in my head, I'm like, Jamaican professional? So no, it stands for just as the peace, which I realized. So I call him, and he's like, okay, he's going to contact his JP because he needed him to do some other stuff anyway. So I'm like, perfect. I don't know if a day or so goes by, or however long goes by, and I don't hear from my uncle, and time is a-going. Because at this point, I was probably in Jamaica like some days already, and my free paper soon bun, and time soon come for me to like high time for me to go back to Florida. So I remember me and my cousin Talisha, we're in Hilo, and she's buying up like bag juice and Bigfoot because she's going back to Miami, I think either the next day or two. So she's buying up her, her trinkets and stuff to carry back home. So we're in Hilo, and I was like, you know what? Let me call my other cousin Eva, because he's a businessman, and I just kind of like Eva. He's just calm and cool. He just has a nice vibe about him. So I was like, you know what? I need to get this stuff done, and I called my cousin Eva, pretty much for some guidance at this point. So I called him, and right when I'm calling him, like I buck up 2 of my other cousins in the same plaza. So I called my cousin Eva, but he's out of town, and he can't notarize my documents anyway because we share the same last name. And at that point, I didn't even know he was a JP. So he was like, who are you with? And I was like, oh, Lion is here. That's my cousin. I'm going to call him Lions for the video. I said, Lion is here. So he's like, let me talk to him. So they talk maybe for like less than a minute, and then they hang up, and then Lion proceeds to give me and Talisha directions to go find this JP that Eva told him about. So FYI, a little disclaimer, this was Talisha's first time, I believe, driving in Jamaica. So, and normally, like, when I'm in town, I put data on my phone, on the plan, my Digicel plan. But I don't know if I had enough, like, data or, like, the maps just not really updating internationally. So, FYI. But we know how to go from, like, the house to the store in certain places, even though it was, like, her first time driving. So, he proceeds to give us directions to go find this JP. So I'm like, okay, cool. So we go and we attempt to find the man. We never found him. So we turn around and go back home. And we knew how to get back home. So we weren't like lost in the streets in Jamaica or anything like that. But we turned around and went back home. So maybe like later that day or maybe like later the day, Lions like, called me to check up to see like, how it went. And I was like, we never found the place. And I love him dearly. That's my little spar when I'm in Jamaica. But he goes, oh, you don't find the place? And I'm like, first of all, Bertrand, calm down. And I'm like, second of all, you give two foreigners directions to go find a place that we don't know, to go find a man we don't know. So I'm like, give us a little benefit of the doubt. So it turns out in conversation that like we were like right there, because when you're like thinking of directions, you're trying to think of landmarks like, okay, Island Grill was at the corner, the primary school was at the corner, the church is at the corner, or so on. So in conversation, I realized we were just right there. And the thing about it, like from the foreign perspective, Jamaica's roads, like I'm always so amazed at how Jamaicans drive in Jamaica. Always so amazed. I'm like, they drive like they literally carved out and planned out the road themselves, like the current people driving. And then like the road system is not like, and yes, I'm comparing it to America just because that's where I live, that's where I'm from. But like the road system, like here in America, it's like, okay, you're on 160th Street and you need to get to like 183rd Street. You got to go up about like 23 blocks or so to figure out where you're going. The road system there, or at least where in the areas that I'm at, there's not very definitive, clear signs to say like, this road is this road is that. So anyway, now I lost my, I lost my train of thought. But anyway, so yeah, I'm back. So we realized we were there, but it didn't work out. So he proceeds to call another guy for me, which is now my JP. So shout out to Mr. G. And so Mr. G comes, I think, the next day. I think this was like a Friday or so. And so Mr. G comes and he notarizes my photos. And I find out that Mr. G was actually like a family friend anyway. So he notarizes my photos and it's all Independence Weekend. Everything's cool. So Monday comes and I'm going back to PICA because I leave the next day. So Independence was on that Sunday, the 6th, and now it's Monday the 7th. So I'm back at PICA, and I'm now with like 3 other cousins that come with me to PICA. So, and this is the cousin I was with was the one that told me about the TRN. So if you watch that video, you'll know what I'm talking about. So we all go to PICA, and they come with me like inside. So we park, and we go back to that guard gate, and the guy was like, you can't get in. And I'm like, excuse me? And I'm like, this is some type of club or like bouncer situation. So I'm like, what do you mean I can't get in? So he was like, you don't have on no sleeves. And I was just like, so you can't show any arms. So we weren't like skinning out in our clothes or anything like that, but we just had on sleeveless clothes, and as well as my cousin. So that's when I realized certain, maybe government places you go into, you cannot go in there with like sleeveless clothes. So like this with the sleeve on it. It'll be good to go, but not sleeveless. So we go back in the car, and she drove my cousin Shaw's car. So we go back in his car to see if he has a Gansey or a jacket or something we can throw on, because I'm like, I'm getting in PICA today because I leave tomorrow and I need this application to go through. So he don't have nothing for me to throw on. So we go walk across the street to Tropical Plaza, which is like a shopping plaza. And this is PICA in Kingston, by the way. So we walk across the street, we go buy a t-shirt, and we throw on, and we get back over. So we get in, and then I'm back at the second security guard where you have to buzz in. So the security is like, they can't come upstairs if they're not doing no business. So they had to wait outside in the waiting area. The waiting area is outside under a tent in a big August Jamaica heat. So they all 3 had to wait outside. I go back upstairs. I sign my name on the form, and I'm waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. Finally, They call my name, and I'm back with Miss Anglin again. So I'm sitting at the desk, and she's going through my paperwork. At this point, my cousin finds her way upstairs, and I don't know what she told the guard. So she finds her way upstairs, and she's sitting next to me now at the desk. So Miss Anglin gets up, and she's talking to some other clerk, and she comes back. And I knew when she was coming back, something was up because she had my pictures in her hand. She goes, Miss Moncrief, we can't accept the pictures. So I'm like, excuse me? Like, at this point, I'm like, what the hell is going on today? So, because in my head, I'm like, Miss England, you just seen me a few days ago with the same paperwork, the same photos that you clearly seen on the back was not notarized. Now it is, same hairstyle and everything. Because I know, like, so in my head I was thinking, because when you apply for certain things in Jamaica, like the photo and I think like the date when you get it notarized by JP, it can't be like 6 months. It can't be older than 6 months. So I'm thinking something was wrong. Something clearly was wrong, but it wasn't that. So she's like, we can't understand the date on the photo. So I'm just like, are you kidding me? I was here. I did what you told me to do. I came back. So my cousin is getting tight now. And then, so I was getting annoyed too, because like, I just feel like it was stumbling blocks, right? So I'm like, you know what? This is not supposed to happen. I was frustrated, but I wasn't going to go off into people, big government office. So I was like, listen, I go back to foreign tomorrow. And at this point, I don't even feel like I want to get this stuff done anymore. So she was just like, well, what time is your flight tomorrow? I'm like, 6. In the morning, I'm like, no, in the evening. Oh, man, you're good. So she's like, tell you what you do. And I'm like, here we go. So she's like, I'll accept your application as pending, and I'm going to send you downstairs to pay, but you need to get the other photos or new photos notarized properly. So she proceeds to like write on a little post-it note exactly verbatim how it's supposed to read, as if the JP man don't know because he's a JP. But anyway, and then so I go downstairs to pay, and I expedited just because, as I said, my uncle was supposed to come to town, and I don't want to like mess up with the scheduling. And then I come back upstairs, and I told her, listen, my uncle's going to pick it up for me. So she gave me like this little form that I had to like fill out to give to my uncle along with the receipt, so that way he would show to them in order to pick up my stuff. So at this point, I was just like, all right, fine. I was a little bit annoyed still, because I'm like, I leave tomorrow, and now I got to like figure this out again. So I'm like, all right. So I think at some point, I don't know if it was like that particular time or the first time I went, she was like, why don't you do your picnic citizenship too? And I don't know if she really said like picnic or she said children or child. But I was just like, I don't have any. And she's like, oh, sorry. And I'm like, no, it's okay. So I'm just going to assume if that's you and you're applying for citizenship and you have children, I'm going to assume you can do it at the same time. If not, you can always just do it after you get yours. So you can just check PICA's website for like more details on that. So I'm like, all right. So we leave the place, and I call back Mr. G, my JP, on the phone, because I'm like, okay, you need to come today and get this stuff re-notarized. Because remember, when I did my pictures, you get 4 photos at the man next door, but so I had 2 extra photos left over, so I didn't have to take new photos. So luckily my JP comes back and he notarizes the photos and makes sure like everything is, crisscross applesauce. Hold on. Sorry, guys. So he comes back and notarizes. This is like Monday evening sometime. So it's my last night in Jamaica. So I go out with my cousins. We go uptown Mondays and stuff like that. The next day, Tuesday comes, and this is the day I'm leaving. But remember, my flight's in the evening, so I do have a window. So my friend takes me to PICA, and he's like, do you want me to come in with you? And I'm like, nope, because I'm not staying long. I'm just going to go drop off these photos. I'll be right back. So he's like, all right, cool. So I go through the security, good, because I remember, make sure I don't wear nothing sleeveless this time. And then I go around to the other security. She buzzes me in, and I go upstairs, and I'm not signing my name on no paper. I go straight to Miss Anglin's desk. I don't remember if she was with a customer or not, but I give her the photos, and she looks on the back, and she's like, okay, because I guess it's good now. And then she tells me safe flight, and I'm like, thank you. And now, my glad bag busts, because now I'm like finished with it, like it's fully submitted. So keep in mind, I forgot to mention this part. During that trip, I had a cousin who died back in Miami during that trip. So when I came back, his funeral was like the following weekend. So maybe almost a week after I came back or so, I'm talking to my uncle, and he's like, they called him and said my citizenship was ready to be picked up. So I'm like, okay, great. So he's like, he's going to go later that week to pick it up, and he can FedEx it to me. And I'm like, you don't have to FedEx it, because I'm like, that's probably expensive and it's not urgent. So whenever you come, you just bring it. So twos. So the funeral time come for my cousin, and we leave the repast and everything. And that same night at my cousin's funeral, and I wrote it down so I'm not like, because the dates were like all jumbled together, because this got hectic at that point. My cousin's funeral was the 19th. And then the night of my cousin's funeral, I found out that my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, got diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. So, and it wasn't like, so like with my grandmother, it wasn't like, oh, she was good like a spring chicken today, and next day she was diagnosed. No, like we knew she was going down like from months before. So it was like a gradual thing. But during that time, like when I came back from Jamaica, like during that week, she was in the hospital. But now it made sense because she was just declining like so drastic. So like when it rains, it pours. So we find out my grandmother has stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and the doctor gives her a month to live. And she doesn't last that long. So my aunt and my mom calls my uncle and was like, tell them what it is. So he ends up coming like that Friday. And that's when I got my citizenship paper. And then the next day, grandma dies. So in my head, I figured, okay, grandma was like kind of waiting for my uncle to come. But it was like in the reality of it, though it was a sad time, like it was a good time, because like we were all like, her kids and her grandkids was all around her. And we were like in the room when she like was pronounced dead, and we're singing her favorite gospel songs, and like in the moments of while she's like traveling, as Jamaicans sing, and going home. So it was like a beautiful moment that we were all together. So unfortunately, my grandmother passed. So my grandmother was a resident of Florida, but she lived a bi-coastal life between like Florida and Jamaica. So we are now planning 2 funerals, one for Florida, one for Jamaica. And I mean, though she lived a bi-coastal life, all her final arrangements was always going to happen in Jamaica anyway. So we're planning 2 funerals, and funeral here comes, this is like American Labor Day weekend. And luckily, her body gets to Jamaica right before Hurricane Irma. So this is during Hurricane Irma time. So luckily, Florida funeral happens. Her body gets to Jamaica good. And then Hurricane Irma hits. And, power is out. Airport closed. Flights are being, canceled, rescheduled. Everything is just a mess. I'm here now like trying to repack my suitcase in the dark because power goes out, and we're used to power going out down here and everything like that. And luckily I just came out from Jamaica, so I didn't have to do too deep of a repacking, but I'm like packing my clothes in the dark because there's no lights, there's shutters on the house, so it's dark. And then just the whole mix, there was just a lot going on. I'm ordering dresses online through JCPenney, to find funeral clothes, and it should have been coming, but Hurricane Irma delayed it, and I was finally able to pick it up, and then, it was just a lot going on. So luckily, my flight didn't actually get canceled. It got delayed a bit, thank God. But we ended up going back to Jamaica literally like a month after I just came back. I was back in Jamaica for my grandmother's funeral. So that's what led me to do my passport. So that's now you're just getting like, I guess, your a preview of like the next video where we're going to talk all about the passport. But that's what led me to go do my passport, and I'll talk more about that in the next video. But that was pretty much like my citizenship story. So I do hope somehow this video was, I guess, interesting or entertaining or somehow informative nonetheless. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. And of course, if you know somebody that will find this video helpful or beneficial, please do share the wealth with them. As always, you can link up with me online everywhere at AshFiMon. And until next time, thanks so much for tuning in.